What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And joining me today, Chris, Fedor, cleveland.com Cavs beat reporter, and Jimmy Watkins, cleveland.com columnist. And we're coming to you guys after the Cavs' latest win, 122-116 over the Atlanta Hawks. And guys, we knew coming into tonight's game that this one had playoff implications, not only for where the Cavs might want to end up in the standings, whether third or fourth in the Eastern Conference, but also where the Atlanta Hawks could fall, either fifth or sixth in the Eastern Conference. And we got a little bit of a potential preview with the Cavs and Atlanta Hawks if they end up being the fourth and fifth seed to match up in the first round. This had playoff environment energy, guys. Rocket Arena, it had the ups and downs, the roller coaster emotions of the hype of plays, and then the lull of nervousness when the Atlanta Hawks went on their run and took a double-digit lead of their own. What did you guys learn after tonight's game about this Cleveland Cavaliers team and a potential matchup with the Atlanta Hawks?
Guys, the thing that stands out to me is that I think going into this series, if it is the two teams playing in the 4-5 matchup, and that's still to be decided, there are some things that still have to play themselves out. But if it is them, and right now it's the highest statistical probability, the Cavs are going to have an advantage. And that advantage is Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen inside. They just don't have a lot of bulk. If you look at the Hawks, the way that they're built, the way that their roster is constructed, they've got size, they've got length, they've got athleticism, they've got three-point shooting, they've got speed, they're a tempo team, they've got playmaking, they've got multiple creators on the offensive end of the floor, but they don't have a lot of interior bulk. And there are certain kinds of players that seem to bother Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen more than others. We've seen it throughout the course of the last couple of years in the playoffs. The Hawks don't have those kinds of guys. Evan Mobley's very comfortable in a matchup against Onyeka Okongwu. It's his old AAU teammate. He's been playing against him, playing with him for years. So there's a comfort there. There's an understanding of what Okongwu can do, what he can't do, ways that Evan Mobley can attack him. And then Jarrett Allen, the same kind of thing. Like, yeah, there were moments throughout the course of tonight's game where Jarrett looked like he was laboring. It looked like he was grimacing. He wasn't his same explosive self. But when you flash forward and you start to look at the matchups, you say to yourself, Jalen Johnson, Mo Gay, Onyeka Okongwu, those aren't the kinds of bigs that are going to be problematic for Jarrett and Evan Mobley. And we've been talking about Evan Mobley being under the microscope. We've been talking about Evan Mobley being the X factor. This would be the kind of playoff series where he could be the dominant force that the Cavs have talked about him being. Look what he did tonight. The aggression, the force, the dunks, the layups, the offensive rebounds, the defensive rebounds, the blocked shots, all of those kinds of things. Those are the things that the Cavs have been looking for from Evan. Those are the things that this fan base has been looking for from Evan. And I think it would be a very advantageous matchup for the Cavs from that standpoint. There are other areas that I think Atlanta can exploit, but that is the thing that stood out to me, is that Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley would be critical in a series against Atlanta, and the Cavs would have a distinct advantage around the rim.
Evan Mobley could have gotten whatever he wanted tonight. I mean, that first half, 16 and 10 in the first half, Donovan gets going in the third quarter, so there's not as much room for Evan to contribute in that second half. But, the 18 rebounds, the way that Evan Mobley can control the glass, that's really important. I think that Jarrett Allen still finding ways to contribute. Going back and forth on Jarrett Allen tonight, because on one hand, he's limping around a little bit. On the other hand, he's trying to put people on posters. It's touch and go. I think you could tell that it's touch and go for him. You can tell when he's feeling good. You can tell when he isn't. On top of the bigs point, I think you saw a lot of reasons to believe in the Cavs tonight. And I think you saw the areas where they can have holes poked. That third quarter that they played tonight, that was a masterpiece. They scored 44 points. I think every player who played in the quarter, 8 players scored. They made a bunch of threes. They were forcing turnovers. Like, that is the vision. That is the vision for this team. They held the Hawks to 20. defense, engaged. Another note for the future playoff series. When you get this Hawks team bogged down in the half court, it's a different conversation. CJ McCollum and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, good as they have been for that team, are not guys that I'm ready to go to war with in a playoff series against Donovan Mitchell and James Harden. I think that's stating the obvious in that sense. But like, you could feel the Hawks struggling. I felt like most offenses have been pretty comfortable against the Cavs, regardless of context, including the Hawks in the first half. The Hawks had like a 130 offensive rating in the half court in the first half of this game. Third quarter, Cavs were engaged. Something changed. Something changed. I don't know what they were talking about at halftime, but it was a marked difference. You can just capture that energy, bottle that energy you had in the third quarter, that two-way play. This team can play with anybody. Then you go to the fourth quarter and you look back at that first half, and it's like guys are just waltzing to the rim, and the Hawks are beating them down the court after makes at times. And it's just like, it's so frustrating because you know there's something special in there, and you see all the talent on the court. They haven't been able to put it all together over long stretches yet. So I think you can look at this game a lot of different. You can see whatever you want to see in this game. I think the Hawks are clearly outmanned, and I went into tonight thinking the Cavs would beat them, if maybe be challenged by them in the playoff series. I'm exiting thinking the Cavs would beat them, if maybe be challenged by them in a playoff series. But I think it would be good. They would be challenged in ways that would help them down the line. And I think that it was good to see that third quarter, the Cavs, reach their final form, so to speak.
To your point, Jimmy, I think it was kind of a microcosm of the season. The Cavs have given plenty of reasons to say, okay, this is a legitimate title contending team. This is one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. They should be one of the favorites in the Eastern Conference. Not the favorite, that's Boston, but one of the favorites in the Eastern Conference because they've shown that kind of prolific ceiling. Even down the stretch here, and the schedule is what it is, but they're playing pretty good basketball, all things considered. And then they've also shown at various points throughout the course of this season where there are plenty of reasons to doubt them. And if you're somebody that is doubting them, you say, see, look at that, look at that, look at that. So you have the third quarter and you're like, oh my God, like this is the ceiling of this team. This is who they can be at their peak. And then you see the fourth quarter and you're like, this is why I don't believe in you.
The Atlanta Hawks are a test that the Cavs might need early into the playoffs. A team that has a lot of things that opposing teams or fans could think that would go against them, right? Top tier pace, the 3-point shooting, the length, all of these different areas that the Cavs have not been able to address over the 82 game regular season, at least not to the level that we would have had satisfaction with. So if you're able to overcome an opponent like that in areas where you have also lacked in previous postseasons, like physicality, like rebounding, like toughness, mental and physical, I think that not only gets you over a hump, but it also gives you a lot of internal motivation and a lot of internal belief. And it also kind of spreads itself as well. Because another area that I think was extremely important, guys, was the free throw disparity. The Cavs took 35 free throws, the Atlanta Hawks took just 15. Obviously, it was apparent in the fourth quarter when Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels both fouled out in the contest. I think that's a testament to how the Atlanta Hawks are such a good team in transition, even though they matched the Cavs in fast break points tonight. I think it's interesting in how the game and how the postseason inherently slows everything down. And Jimmy asked Atlanta Hawks head coach Quinn Snyder before the game about this, about how it translates. And he kind of talked about it being game to game and needing to dictate your own thing. Well, the Cavs, for once, it felt like, dictated their own game. They were the ones slowing the game down. They were the ones getting to the free throw line. Not just Donovan Mitchell and James Harden foul baiting, but getting the ball to Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley and allowing them to be physical and forceful. To go back to Chris's point, that's an advantage that they're going to have. And I think it's also showcasing how the Cavs were utilizing their defensive approach to start the game, right? We saw not Evan Mobley matched up with Onyeka Okongwu. He was guarding Jalen Johnson, and you had Jarrett Allen guarding Dyson Daniels, and you had Dean Wade with CJ McCollum and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and you had the different mismatches, but it was purposeful. It was the Cavs going out of their way to utilize a defensive force that they felt comfortable with in every matchup. So even if the Atlanta Hawks might have gotten them in mismatches or cross mismatches in transition, everybody was comfortable guarding. And I thought it was interesting that Keon Ellis mentioned it in his conversation at Shoot Around, talking about how switching is an area where the Cavs could utilize a little bit more, a little bit better, especially in the postseason. And this wasn't necessarily switching, but it was enveloping confidence in every player on the floor to do what is necessary. Even if Onyeka Okongwu is going to be shooting 40% from deep on 5 3-point attempts per night, Jarrett Allen, Evan Mobley, you have more comfortability on the perimeter to guard that now because you've had that experience. And I think there is a lot of different instances where we saw positives from the Cavs tonight, even in areas of weakness that show positivity. And although we don't know what it's going to look like on Friday, I think this is a good step forward, especially being a test kind of game, as Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley described it.
I also think you saw the benefit and the impact of Dean Wade, especially in the starting lineup. Very small sample size, because Dean Wade was on a minute restriction, and he might have finished the game tonight if he wasn't on a minute restriction, but he was. Um, and the starting lineup of James Harden, Donovan Mitchell, Dean Wade, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen only played around 9-10 minutes, but the offensive rating was astronomical. The defensive rating was incredible. The net rating obviously was overwhelming. And I think it just shows a sign in this is interesting because when it comes to the Dean thing, so many people ask, how and why is this lineup so successful for the Cavs? How and why is he such a good fit in this starting lineup? And at some point, you have so much data that you just have to stop asking those questions. And you just have to say, there is too much data to just ignore this. There's too much data to go another direction. Everything points to them being a better team offensively and defensively with Dean Wade in the starting lineup. Everything points to them being a successful winning team with Dean Wade in that starting lineup. And I thought it was pretty telling that Kenny went that direction the first opportunity that he had to. This wasn't a game where it was like managing minutes, it was resting guys, it was taking this big picture approach. Obviously, there were certain things that Kenny had to navigate. Jarrett Allen, Dean Wade, things like that. But for the most part, this was all hands on deck. This wasn't Memphis the other night. This wasn't Utah earlier on the road trip or Golden State. This isn't going to be what Friday could be or what Sunday could be. This was one where the Cavs were like, all right, as Kenny Atkinson said pregame, let's go hoop. Let's go try to play tonight's game with a purpose. And with that being the mentality, I think it was telling that he went with Dean Wade in the starting lineup. And he went with him because of defense, because of size, because of switchability, because of versatility. At the beginning of the game, Dean Wade was on CJ McCollum. He could also guard Jalen Johnson. He could also guard Nickeil Alexander-Walker. But there was just a different kind of element that the Cavs had because Dean was available, albeit on a minute restriction. And I think when you're playing against this type of team in Atlanta, you need those things that Dean brings to the table. And you felt those things that Dean brings to the table. So I think if you're talking about going into this potential series against Atlanta, one of the advantages that you're going to have is inside, maybe on the boards, in the paint. Dean Wade helps with those kinds of things. Dean Wade can make it difficult on CJ McCollum. Dean Wade can make this team a better rebounding team. And then if he's making shots the way that he was in the first quarter and shooting, more importantly, shooting those and stepping into those with confidence, then all of a sudden you're like, wow, this is the lineup. This is the lineup that Kenny has been searching for all season long.
Yeah, Dean Wade brings a combination of point of attack defense and rebounding that I don't think anyone else on the team does. Point blank period. Those are two weaknesses for this team. He fills them nicely, and like Chris said, when he also scratches the spacing itch, when he also scratches the 3-point itch, there you go. That's the player that the Cavs have been searching for since they traded for Donovan Mitchell. Essentially, we've been talking about Dean Wade as maybe, sorta, could he maybe get there? That this entire time. The injuries just haven't lined. He's never quite been available enough or in the right rhythm as a result of not being available enough during a playoff run for it to all coalesce. this feels like as close as we've ever been to that. Tonight, first game back, we'll see how it plays out in the playoffs, but this feels like as close as the Cavs have had to the version of Dean Wade that the numbers suggest they have in any of their playoff runs, right? So that's exciting. The other thing I want to mention, we were talking about Evan Mobley earlier. I don't think it's just this series. I think actually we saw it against Boston too in terms of matchups. Like there are a couple of teams that the Cavs might have to go through where they're going to have front court advantages, and those Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley are going to be swing pieces. But I just think that generally, since he started playing real minutes from the calf injury when he returned, Evan Mobley is basically 20 and 10 on like 66% effective field goal percentage. And even that is probably a level shy of what the Cavs were projecting at the beginning of the season when we were talking about, building off an All-NBA appearance, and Kenny was talking about him as an MVP candidate at Summer League, right? But this is a version of Evan Mobley that can swing a playoff series for you. If he's playing like this every night, if he's, defending the way he was tonight, if he's grabbing rebounds the way he was tonight, if he is beating people up, taking advantage of his matchups, lowering shoulders, pivoting feet, throwing down dunks with force, given that they have Donovan Mitchell and James Harden around him, that is good enough. That's really good. I just feel like, and we're guilty because the Cavs are guilty of holding the carrot in front of us and telling us how everything about Evan Mobley's potential. So many of the conversations about Evan Mobley are about what he can be and isn't yet, but what he is right now is pretty darn good.
Yeah, I don't want to be Dr. Phil or anything like that, but I think Evan needed what happened to him at the beginning of the year. I think this team needed what happened to him at the beginning of the year. Because I think from Evan's perspective, yes, he's been in the spotlight. Yes, he's been under the microscope, but not to this level. Not to this level. Because if you think about it, back in high school, he was on maybe the best AAU team ever assembled. Okay, then he gets to USC, and he's this big-time recruit, and he leads USC to the NCAA tournament. He has all this success playing alongside his brother. He goes on to be the number 3 pick. He's second in Rookie of the Year. So he has been successful. He hasn't had to deal with adversity. He hasn't had to deal with struggles and failures the way that he did at the beginning of this year. Like the beginning of this year, Evan didn't play to his standards. Evan was disappointed in his own play. And he knew that he was a big part of what the Cavs were supposed to be. And for him to go through those failures, I think it was an eye-opener for him. For him to be snubbed from the All-Star team, I think that was an eye-opener for him. For him to be the reigning Defensive Player of the Year and not anywhere in that conversation for Defensive Player of the Year, I think that was an eye-opener to him. And sometimes, again, you grow through success, but other times you grow through failure. And I think he learned a lot about his own game. I think he learned about where his game still needs to go and where it's not yet at. And now he's like, okay, certain things I still can't do. And that's okay. Let's put those to the side. Let's not try to tap into those things right now. Maybe that's 2 years down the road. Maybe that's 3 years down the road. But let's get back to being who I am at my core. Let's get back to being what made me the 3rd overall pick in the draft, the runner-up Rookie of the Year, the second team all-defense, or the second team all-NBA player, the first-time All-Star. Let me get back to doing those kinds of things. And he has. He's leaned more into the strengths of his own game rather than trying to refine his weaknesses on the fly in real game situations, in pressure moments, and things along those lines. So I do think that Evan, development is never linear, and sometimes it takes this winding path. And I think part of what has happened with his development is that he wasn't good enough. To his own expectations, he didn't reach those. It made him look at things a different kind of way, and it made him refocus. And I think that was really, really good. And I think part of the reason why Kenny was hard on him at the beginning of the year and some of his teammates were so demanding of him, 1, they believe he can handle it. But 2, they believe that he needed that because he hadn't had that previously in the NBA. The way that he was criticized at the beginning of this year, he had never been criticized like that throughout his entire basketball life because he was dominant at every single level. And because he met these expectations or exceeded these expectations at every single level. This was the first time where he really had to look at himself in the mirror and say, no, like this isn't about Darius Garland. This isn't about Donovan Mitchell. This isn't about anybody. I'm just not good enough right now. I'm not playing well enough. I'm not playing to my standard. And yes, there were circumstances attached to it with his calf, and he was in and out of the lineup and all that kind of stuff. But I think the failures at the beginning of the season have helped him become the player that he is right now. And I think the failures of this Cavs team as a whole, I think going through those kinds of things, we'll have to see how it manifests itself in the playoffs and if they really are battle tested and hardened because of that. But it does feel like something that could be, emphasis on could be, a benefit for this team as a whole because they had to learn how to deal with those kinds of things and they had to learn how to overcome those kinds of things.
I do wonder if you put truth serum in Kenny, would he go back on the Summer League broadcast and say this guy's going to be a top 5 MVP guy? Because it's one thing to try to put that kind of stuff on Evan's plate on the court, but to create the hype behind it, I don't think that necessarily suited Evan's personality. I don't think that helped him. I don't think that helped him manage the criticism, and I don't think it helped in the moments when he's, overthinking on the court. I don't think it helps to have that in the back of his mind. That being said, now that the Cavs have adjusted midstream, and I was asking Kenny a little bit about this today, I do think they've found a happy medium here. Basically, the Evans season, it's been a wild season for him. Starts off top 5 MVP expectations. Here's the ball. Do stuff with it. Ooh, we don't like what you're doing with it. Give the ball back. Give the ball. Give the ball back to us. We're gonna take a little bit more off the play. Oh, now you're being a little bit too passive. We need you to do less than you were doing, but more than you're doing now. And then he gets hurt. Like, what? There's a lot going on there. Then he comes back. James Harden is playing awesome with Jarrett Allen. That's a dynamic that now Jarrett Allen's the darling, right? That everyone is talking about in terms of the two bigs. And Jarrett goes down. Evan gets to play with James Harden a little bit. And I feel like he's found like this happy medium. He's found his place in the offense. It's lower your shoulder, play out of the short roll, a dribble or two, live at the rim. Live at the rim. That's not the unicorn that we were promised. He is not shooting like 37% from 3 again. He doesn't have a dribble package, but that's okay. That's not what they need right now.
There's another layer to this. We've talked about Jarrett Allen, and maybe we'll get to that a little bit more in depth about what he's dealing with currently, because I still think that is alarming. But we talked about Evan Mobley stepping up, right? We talked about how James Harden fits into all of this. I think we continue to kind of gloss over how well Donovan Mitchell has handled everything this season. Everything. From Darius Garland and Max Strus not being able to start the season to having to ramp up his offseason workouts to be ready to be peak Donovan Mitchell at the start of the season. And for him to continue to alter his game plan, alter his mindset throughout an 82-game season, depending on whatever the game calls for, depending on whatever the team needs or whatever roster construction he has around him, he has consistently done that. And I think we can't get lost in the sacrifices that he's made, because Jimmy and I were talking about it today. There were times where Donovan is going on this heater and he wants the ball. And James Harden just kind of looks him off and is like, it's ISO time. I got to get mine so we can get into this rhythm, or I got to find JA or Evan or whoever is on the floor with them. And the biggest thing for me was Donovan Mitchell coming into the season saying, I'm going to preserve my body because I haven't been healthy in the playoffs. I need to make sure that I'm going to be able to be at my best self when that time of the season comes around. I'm not going to drive as much. I'm only going to dunk when Coco Jones is in the building. But now he's saying that he has to go. Kenny Atkinson understands that he is at his best. The Cavs understand he's at his best when he's driving to the basket because of the threat that he poses, because of his shot that he was honing throughout the season. And to all his credit, he's had the most points in a single season in his career this year because of the alterations that he's made to his game, because of the three-point acumen that he grew. He's been able to kind of spin this web of being able to do multiple things all at once, whether that's his three-point shot, his mid-range game, now getting to the line and slowing the game down, as I mentioned earlier. There's so many dynamics to his game that opens up for the team. And I think we all noticed it at points tonight where James Harden wasn't necessarily at himself. Evan Mobley was sometimes struggling with swarms, sometimes being able to handle them and power through. But there were also moments when Donovan Mitchell wasn't on the floor and everything felt off. And it felt like the Cavs were getting back to last postseason, where Donovan was going to have to take 30 shots for them to be able to pull it out, especially when the Atlanta Hawks went on the run and got up to 11 points. And then Donovan kind of stepped back in and was like, hey, I can score and I will score if I need to, but I also believe in the roster that we built. So I'm going to drive and I'm going to use my gravity and not necessarily shoot the basketball, but I'm going to kick out Dean Wade, Sam Merrill, Max Strus. James Harden even got a catch and shoot three off of Donovan Mitchell's drives. I think there's so much that Donovan Mitchell encompasses when it comes to this basketball team. And we talk about the leadership, we talk about the skill set, but the mental fortitude that he's had this season, I think can't go unnoticed because of how much he's had to endure, how much he's had to give while also being the franchise face and trying to empower others in a different way because last year didn't end the way that he wanted it to.
You know, it's interesting, guys, because my guy Tim Bontemps from ESPN, he always reaches out to all these different media members, all these end of season awards voters, and he takes a straw poll of where things stand in the MVP. And I was going back the other day with all of my communication with Tim, and I was looking at kind of where I had MVP stuff at the beginning of the year, then at the midway point, then three quarters, then toward the end of the season. And I consistently had Donovan on my MVP ballot, and he is going to be on my MVP ballot. And that's not because Cade's ineligible. It's not because of all the other uncertainty with are these guys going to meet the threshold. It's because I think he deserves it because of all of the things that you just said, Ethan, and the burden that he had to carry at the beginning of the year and the way that the team completely fell apart when he was off the floor versus on the floor, especially at the beginning of the year when Evan was going. He has been a stabilizing force for this team that has had a lot of turmoil, a lot of turbulence throughout the year. And I don't think you can ignore that. And I don't think you can just turn a blind eye to what he's doing from a scoring standpoint, what he's doing from a leadership standpoint, what he's doing to integrate James Harden, a huge piece midway through the season, what he's doing from setting a tone for this team with his daily habits. All of that kind of stuff matters. And I feel like as the beat reporter for this team, I have a responsibility to try and explain the kind of impact that Donovan has on a daily basis, on a nightly basis, that not everybody gets to see firsthand. And there have been so many different conversations that I've had since March started with all these other reporters when I go visit these other cities when we go on the road, whether it's San Francisco, Sacramento, Utah, wherever it is, because all of us reporters kind of talk. And one of the questions that I'm always asked by all these reporters is, hey, which Cavs players should be on my end of season award ballot? Which guys should be in consideration? Are there any that are worthy of it? And the first thing that I say is consider Donovan for MVP, at least on your ballot. I'm not saying he's going to win the award. I'm not saying he should be number one or number two, but you can put 5 names on there. And it's just hard for me seeing him on a nightly basis. It's hard for me to find 5 or 6 players that are more impactful and more quote unquote valuable to their franchise and who they have become than Donovan.
It's funny because Donovan was talking tonight about how he had to throttle down a little bit this year, right? He wanted to put less wear and tear on his body. He didn't want to live at the rim, and these guys like Derrick Rose and John Moran, Donovan's better built than some of those guys. Those guys have short careers because as fun as the same reason they're so fun to watch is the same reason they have short careers because they attack the rim with reckless abandon on every drive, and they don't care how hard they fall or who they're challenging or what crazy angle they're trying to take at the rim. Donovan is trying to be, as he approaches 30, conscientious about that. He's trying to save himself a la LeBron, a la James Harden for a long playoff run. He kicked it into gear tonight, right? He also scored the most points of his entire career this year. I think it was like 1,993 or something like that. It's an interesting contrast to me that you can be trying to keep in mind that you have if it all goes according to plan, you have such a long way to go, and he's only playing like 33 minutes a game. At the same time, you're carrying, and it's not like this is, he's played, I think tonight was the 70th game he's played. He's been healthy, but he's had seasons where he's played more than that. Like, he's he's still carrying a very heavy scoring load, and for the early part of this season, it was Donovan and the Donettes at times. It felt like before they got James Harden, and then to do that and then invite one of the higher usage, more unique stars in the league into your locker room. That's a heck of a move to pull off. That's a heck of a it's for the entire team. It's been a crazy season, but I think James Harden's presence it's the biggest adjustment on Donovan. Who else have we seen on this team that when Donovan is like actively calling for the ball on a night where Donovan has it going, just turns their head and looks the other way? On a night, by the way, where James Harden was 6 for 23
Didn't
tonight.
have it going, yeah.
Didn't have it. Didn't have it. The Hawks bothered him. And we could probably talk about that if it ends up being a Hawks Cavs first round series. But like, that's an adjustment. And to Donovan's credit, I mean, this might just be, superstar business as usual. He just put his hands down and let James go to work. A few times I saw it happen. It probably helps that James Harden is like an established guy that Donovan Mitchell, was looking up to as a younger player. That certainly makes a difference. But that is a heck of a thing. That is to have all those things be true, to have Donovan, carry the heaviest or score the most points in his entire career, then welcome James Harden into the fold, and then on a night where everything's going well for Donovan, it's not for James. James waves him off, and it's all good.
It's interesting. Just look at the numbers, and some of these numbers have certainly stabilized because the roster has improved as the season has gone on, because Evan Mobley has reemerged, because Jarrett Allen was unbelievably good in February, because James Harden's a rival in February, and because at the trade deadline, the truth is the Cavs took the negatives from the roster, the net negatives, and they sent them elsewhere. So yeah, this is a better team. Kenny Atkinson has said it. He's shouted it from the mountaintops. We're better. We're better than we were before the trade deadline. And that's like a no-duh statement. But for him to be that forthcoming about it, it kind of speaks to what the view was of the team around the time of the trade deadline. Kind of like, no, we don't have a chance. No, we're not going anywhere this year unless we shake up this roster. So the roster has gotten better, and these numbers have stabilized themselves because James Harden can run the offense when Donovan's off the floor, because the depth is showing more, because there are more pathways to success because of the easy schedule that the Cavs have had in the second half of the season and stuff like that. But with him on the floor, the Cavs have a net rating of 7. With him off the floor, they're basically 0. So there is still, even with all these changes, even with all these roster enhancements, even with these guys playing better in the second half of the season and all the other circumstances that have been beneficial, the Cavs still struggle in a significant way when Donovan is off the floor. They're almost a negative team, a net negative team in the minutes where Donovan is off the floor. And that's what it looked like tonight. For sure, that's what it looked like tonight. Those minutes without Donovan were terrible. I mean, there were multiple times in the fourth quarter where I kept looking toward the tunnel and thinking to myself, all right, Kenny, go get him. I know it's been a short rest for Donovan. Go get him. You got to go get him. Because this team just isn't functioning to the same level offensively or defensively with Donovan out there. And that shows the kind of impact. And I think those numbers kind of highlight just what he means to the Cavs' success. Those are the kinds of numbers, those on-off differential things, those are the kinds of numbers that you see with Nikola Jokic. Those are the kinds of numbers that you see with Victor Wembanyama. Those are the kinds of numbers that you see with Cade Cunningham. Those are the numbers that you see with most MVP candidates. And that's the case that Donovan can make. He doesn't have a case to win it. I know that. But he has the same kind of case to be on a ballot as a lot of those other guys that I talked about.
Guys, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because there's still an entire playoff run to be had. But I do want to tease this a little bit because the adversity that the Cavs have had to face this season and what it is supposed to do, what it is meant to do, what they were talking about at the beginning of the season when Donovan was talking about himself being a psycho, a sicko, about how he loves adversity, right? We talked about Evan Mobley and how he had to undergo his biggest internal transformation. Jarrett Allen dealing with multiple injuries throughout the regular season, someone who had just played 82 games, losing a member of the core four in Darius Garland, someone who was revered in the entire Cavs community, not just because of his play, but because of what he did for the city, right? And him being the longest tenured Cavalier. I wrote a story in January that was headlined, "The Cavs are learning how to handle adversity now, and it will decide their playoff fate." I got a lot of backlash because everybody was like, "Adversity? What are they dealing with? Nobody cares in regular season. It's the 82-game season. They just got to be better." But I think it would be a full circle moment. It would be quite the story if this Cavaliers team was able to get to where we think they can go, even if they don't win the NBA Finals. I think getting to the NBA Finals after enduring everything that this season threw at them is a big step forward. But again, I do not want to get too far ahead of myself because this is one game. The Atlanta Hawks are still really good. They still have a lot of areas that they can utilize to attack the Cleveland Cavaliers. Then you don't know who you face in the second round. Then you don't know who you face in the Eastern Conference Finals. You still got to get over the hump, which is the Boston Celtics, if you get to see them. I just think this, again, reiterating something I said earlier on this podcast, I think if they push past the Atlanta Hawks, if they are the first round opponent, it will be a good first step for this Cleveland Cavaliers team based on everything that they've endured this season, what they've had themselves labeled as from previous playoff losses, and also the tactics and the schemes that the Atlanta Hawks can pose against them based on the style of play that the Cavs have used for the entire 82-game season.
I still think, guys, it's a fascinating conversation about this team overall. Because if you look at historical markers that show, are you a championship level team? Are you not a championship level team? And if you look at the teams in the past that have won these championships, the Cavs have none of them. They have none of them. They didn't win 40 games before losing 20. They're not top 10 in offense and defense. Teams that overhaul their roster and make significant trades at the trade deadline don't win championships. So it's like, if they're going to win a championship and they're going to prove all these doubters wrong, they are going to have to overcome a whole ton of stuff, including all the history that is working against them. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how it plays itself out. I think it's going to be fascinating to see if they can become, the next exception. It happens all the time in sports. You have these exceptions, you have these anomalies. If they're going to win a championship, they would have to become the next anomaly.
Yeah, they'd be a historic outlier. I think you can probably talk yourself into reasons why they could end up being that, right? Like, okay, they don't have the normal win-loss offensive defensive rating markers, right? Okay, that part's pretty easy. They didn't have their full team at the beginning of the season. They didn't like the team that they saw when they got it back, and then they got hurt again. So they traded for James Harden and Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder, and that's a lot. The the thing about teams that don't overhaul their rosters mid-season is that the thing about teams that do overhaul their rosters mid-season is that they see a reason to do that.
Yes, exactly.
Part of the reason why we don't count too many championship teams who have done that is because championship teams are usually set. They usually don't decide in February, oh boy, we need another all-star. Kind of how it works. And then that's the hard one to get over though, because the Cavs, it's a chemistry sport. Defense is a connectivity thing, and they've been struggling on that end to a pretty alarming degree. Tonight, other than the third quarter, it continued. That's their Achilles heel. But if you want to say that, get me to the fourth quarter against anybody, and I've got Donovan Mitchell and James Harden, and you've got whoever you got, I've got a puncher's chance. I'll hear you out. I mean, like other than Tatum and Brown, you taking any other duo in the East over those two? And we still don't know what version. Like Jason Tatum has been about as good as you can expect coming back from his injury. He still hasn't been efficient yet. The Knicks are usually a pretty good clutch team. Jalen Brunson's awesome. There's one Jalen Brunson. Karl Anthony Towns is a little less reliable. James Harden has that same reputation in the playoffs, but that's food for thought. I would also like to direct the Cavs fans' attention to tomorrow at 7:30, Knicks Celtics. This is when it gets real for the seeding. I'm looking at the injury report right now. The Celtics have Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Neemias Queta, and Sam Hauser all listed as game time decisions. If most of those guys play and they beat the Knicks, it's on, man. The Cavs have a real decision here. The Cavs have a real decision here because by winning tonight, they moved in within a half game of New York for the third seed. Now, the Knicks have the tiebreaker, so they would need to pull ahead by a game. But that last Wizards game is just going to be a total crapshoot, man. It's going to be a total crapshoot. The Cavs can rest everybody. The Cavs probably will rest everybody. But, like, you're telling me Tyrese Proctor, Craig Porter Jr., Thomas Bryant and the boys can't beat the Wizards? Why would I think that?
They beat Miami.
Why would I think that? Yeah, exactly. This was a very playing everybody tonight. That was a decision. That was really, I think that's Kenny sticking with his guys, because it was going into this game. Kenny was thinking about it. He kind of floated into the ether last year. Donovan came out publicly pretty against it, and then Kenny played their guys tonight. I think they got something out of this game. I think that could be a positive. But the difference between seeing Detroit in the second round and seeing Boston in the second round could be the difference in whether this roster comes back.
In saying that, I think they call on. I would not be surprised if they called on Corey Bajorquez and they just punted Friday. Seriously. Now Evan Mobley's got to play one more game. So one of these two he's going to play so that he can be eligible for the all defensive stuff. I think that is something that is in consideration. I would be surprised if Jarrett Allen plays Friday. I don't know about Donovan Mitchell. I don't know about James Harden. But just don't be surprised if, even though the Cavs kind of went all hands on deck for this one, sending everybody to Atlanta, making them get on a flight, I don't know that that's going to happen. And Kenny mentioned it after the game. He said he was going to have those conversations with the people that he needed to have those conversations with. He was going to map that out. He was going to have meetings and stuff like that tomorrow morning to decide what the plan is going to be. But again, I would not be surprised if that was one where we've got Corey Bajorquez and he's just punting.
So again, the Knicks go Boston.
Yeah.
Then they play Toronto, who is heavily incentivized to win right now.
That's right.
And they close with Charlotte.
Yep.
Who is going to be heavily incentivized, whether they're trying to get out of the play-in or get, up to that 7-8 and get two shots at making the playoffs. Like, if the Knicks decide that they want to shut it down, and their injury report, other than Tyler Kolek, is pretty clean right now. So I think they're going to go for it against Boston tomorrow. So that'll be interesting. But if they lose to Boston, the opening is there for them to potentially fall into the 4 seed instead of the Cavs. And I would be very interested to see what they did.
Imagine if the Cavs didn't blow the Christmas Day game and the tiebreaker was the other way. The Knicks having that tiebreaker kind of looms here in this whole conversation. And it was always going to loom in this whole conversation because The Knicks had one of the tougher end of season schedules, and the Cavs had one of the easier ones. That was well known, and that's been known for weeks and for months. So, to your point, Jimmy, even if the Cavs, for all these people that are talking about tanking and manipulating the standings and get the seed that you want and get the matchup that you want, what's the pathway to them losing the game against the Washington Wizards? What would they have to do in order to lose that game? They're probably not going to play anybody. That's been their history. Fan appreciation night turns into who's the last guy on the roster and who's that rando who's going to go for 30 or 35 points. Who's going to be Jordan McRae this year? But the Wizards don't want to win. They are doing things to lose. So what could the Cavs do to lose that game? I mean, Tyrese Proctor might be the best player on the floor. He's one of the last players on the roster, but in that game, against that opponent, he might be the best player on the floor. Craig Porter Jr. might go for a triple-double. Get your props. So, what are the Cavs going to play 3-on-5? 4-on-5? I just see no logical path, and I know any given Sunday, sorry, that's a football term, but it's Sunday. It's going to be a Sunday game. Any given Sunday, anything can happen in the NBA. Get out of here. No. The spread, who knows what the spread is going to be? The other night, the spread between Oklahoma City and Utah was 24. That's outrageous to think about. So when you have these kinds of lopsided matchups, even if Donovan's not out there, even if Evan's not out there, even if Jarrett's not out there, even if James Harden's not out there, the Cavs players 9 through 15 are probably better than some of the Wizards starters. And those guys aren't going to be playing for so you're talking about 9 through 15 or whatever the number is going to be for the Cavs versus the Wizards back end roster guys. And I'm supposed to believe that there's a logical pathway besides any given Sunday that the Cavs are actually going to lose that game. So even if they wanted to manipulate the standings, even if they wanted to seek out a specific matchup, I don't know how they would actually go about doing it. I mean, they're probably going to rest almost everybody, and it still might not be enough to actually lose the game against Washington. So I agree. This is going to be really, really fascinating, and this is going to be really, really close. And what happens tomorrow between the Knicks and the Celtics is obviously going to loom over all of this.
And just to reiterate, we're talking like 3 seed versus 4 seed. Is the difference between the Cavs having to play the 1st seed Pistons in the 2nd round if they're the 4 seed, or the 2nd seed Celtics in the 2nd round if they're the 3 seed. And I know people don't like the idea of Jimmy in the standings, and it's, anti-competitive. It certainly goes against everything the players believe in. I get all that. Here's what I would say to you. At the end of a game, when Donovan Mitchell and James Harden have the ball in their hands and they need to close it out, do they intentionally go at the best defender every time? No, they do not. They call up Corey Kispert's man, as Donovan did many times tonight. Say, set a screen right here.
Where's Gabe Vincent? Where's Gabe?
They switch this. I'm going to work. That's all it is.
The other thing here is that, there's still something to be decided when it comes to the 5th seed. The probability does say that it's going to be Atlanta, but Toronto's there. And Toronto gets whatever version of the Miami Heat this is. I mean, we just don't know. It's hard. The 5, 6, all of that stuff still has to be decided here. And to your point, Jimmy, it's not just the Cavs would theoretically avoid Boston. It's the fact that there are 2 teams in the Eastern Conference that loom as legitimate threats to beat the Cavs in a 7-game series. 2, and that's it. And one, I think, is kind of pushing it. I really do think it's Boston and maybe New York. New York would be the second one. So if you're ranking the teams that have a chance to beat the Cavs in a 7-game series in the playoffs. It's Boston 1, New York 2, and then however else you want to rank those teams, right? So if the Cavs were to get to number 3, they would move up from number 4 to number 3. That means they would look at a theoretical path of having to play both of those teams. Both of those teams. Whereas if they stay at 4, they force Boston and New York, the 2 toughest opponents, to battle each other, and then you only have to go through one of them. Do you want to play both of them in a playoff run? Or one of them? Hello? I think it's pretty simple. And history is not going to remember the road that you traveled. History is not going to look down on you because you had a favorable path. Unless you're playing in a bubble with no fans in attendance, and there are all these other weird circumstances surrounding it, people are just going to say, did you win the championship? Did you not? Banners hang forever. The banner's not going to say 2026 NBA champions, but didn't have to play against the Celtics. It's not. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously a setup that every team in the NBA would prefer. Doesn't mean that they're going to manipulate the standings and all that kind of stuff, but these people are human. Like, if we're sitting here and having these conversations about how good Boston is, what do you think the Cavs think of Boston? Like, hello? They're really, really smart from a basketball standpoint. They do this for a living. They study all of this. They know the data. They watch the film. They've played against them multiple times. If we have this feeling about how good Boston is, how complete Boston is, how battle-tested Boston is, what do you think the Cavs think of them? Of course they're like, wow, that team's great. And then if we have all these things that we're saying about Detroit on the other side of it all, like, I don't know about their half-court offense. I don't know about their three-point shooting. I don't know about their secondary creation aside from Cade Cunningham. We're not as smart as these guys in the locker room. So if we can figure all these things out and we can see all these perceived weaknesses, what do you think they think of them? Like, hello? It's just logic.
I agree. And I think you guys covered it all. And I was going to hit on the 5 and 6 seed as well. But Chris, you were on it as you always are. But the only thing that I want to add to this conversation, Chris, you mentioned nobody's going to remember who you had to face. The only NBA championship run that I think people remember, but it's for a positive reason, is the 2011 Dallas Mavericks, when they had to go through the Portland Trailblazers, the Los Angeles Lakers, the Oklahoma City Thunder, and then beat the LeBron James-led Miami Heat to win the championship. I think it's arguably the greatest championship run in NBA history. You can argue with me if you want to. Do that on Subtext. We'll talk about all of that later.
See, I had no clue that Dallas had to play those other teams. I just remember Dallas beating the Miami Heat in the NBA. Seriously. I had no clue that they played Portland in round 1. That was stunning to me when you said that. No idea. But I do remember the finals. I do remember them beating the Heat.
I think that's fair. So we'll have to wait and see if the Cavs can even get that far. But before that, they have to get past the first round, the ever elusive Eastern Conference semifinals, and then the whole can of worms opens. Whoever they have to face, we'll have to get there when we get there. But that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your weekly Hey Chris questions. Tomorrow's the day. We're going to handle all of those heading into the Friday night game against the Atlanta Hawks. We covered a good amount. So make sure you listen to the podcast before sending in those questions, and we'll handle all that we can. The only way to do so is signing up for a 14-day free trial or visiting cleveland.com/Cavs and clicking on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.